This video contains FF14 story spoilers from A Realm Reborn to Endwalker. The Scions of the Seventh Dawn are our steadfast allies. They have stood with us through thick and thin. They journeyed with us to the ends of the great unknown, and sacrificed themselves for the betterment of Aetheris and all who call it home. By now we all know the notable members of the Scions, such as Alize and Alphino, and Kriel and Tataru. This video, however, will dive into the lives and stories of the other members of the Scions. Those members who keep the home flame burning and aid us with ventures across the world when we need them the most. This is the other members of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. This list will more or less be in alphabetical order. Some of these members will be grouped together due to their shared story. I've left timelines for these members in the description. Abatia was a man in his 30s and a native of Valamigo. He started his adult life as an adventurer, through which he gained much renown. It was so much so that the grand companies of Eorzea tried to scout him to join, same way they did with us. Abba, however, had other ideas, and instead chose to join the newly formed Scions when Minfilia extended an invitation. The Scions' ideals matched his adventurer's heart and love of freedom. Abba spent much of his time at the Waking Sands, but also worked in the field to keep the Amalja at bay. Despite his Alamegan heritage, he didn't feel hate for the likes of Arenvald, who was half Garlean. He instead helped to nurture him into a warrior from afar. He even put a money pool together for Arenvald to buy him the armour he's known to wear later on. Abba would sadly meet his end during the Garlean attack on the Waking Sands. He died a hero, bravely defending Arenvald to his last breath. Aenor Cockburn and Clemence are sisters that joined the Scions after the events of Heavensward. Not long after joining, Aenor happened to meet Ocher Boulder, and instantly fell in love with him. Clemence was none too approving of this lusting over Ocher, however, not to mention Aenor adding him to their party when they already had a healer. Aenor's love life would take an even more dramatic turn when she met Ocher's brother Hoary. This meeting began her fantasy of a romance with both brothers simultaneously. While the notable members of the Scions were in their slumber on the first, Aenor and Clemence helped to watch over them and guard the Rising Stones. Aenor would continue her work with the Scions, doing whatever duty she was asked of, especially if it involved the eyes of her affection. Clemence would do much of the same, with both sisters soon aiding their fellow Scions with the research into a cure for tempering. After the cure was perfected, Alize taught Clemence these newly created arts of curing the tempered by way of apoxy. When the Scions disbanded, Aenor was pained by the fact that Ocher and Hoary went their separate ways for the time being. She chose to stick with Hoary, and they both travelled to Gridania, where she would train with the Archers Guild and help out as needed. Sadly, her heart still aches, and she suffers from insomnia due to missing the two brothers being together. Clemence, however, chose to travel to Ishgard to hone the arts of her newly developed skills as an astrologian. As a Endwalker, she can be found in the Astrologicum, learning more about astrology. Aergmhus is a man in his 20s. He began his professional journey as a member of the Maelstrom. When the call was put forth for the Crystal Braves, he was one of many to heed it and join their ranks. He performed his duties and was loyal to the Scions, and was imprisoned for this loyalty in the Rising Stones when Ilbert betrayed the Braves during his rebellion. He remained there for some time until the guards of the Rising Stones lessened, and he and everyone else launched a surprise attack to escape. It was a short time later when he was introduced to Bloumwyda. Bloumwyda joined the Scions during the events of Heavensward. She was originally scouted by Alianne, along with others, in order to locate their missing Scion members, and was invited to join their ranks not long after this. She took a liking to Aergmhus and went with him on many missions, while also keeping an eye on his alcoholism. When the Scions had their names cleared, and then the Braves were disbanded, Aergmhus was one of many who remained loyal, and was invited to officially join the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. They visited many nation provinces during the events of Endwalker, including Garlemald, where they helped to build up an information network, and later remained at the Rising Stones while the others were in Old Sharlayan. As of the Scions disbanding, Aergmhus is in Limsa with Bloumwyda, as they prepare for a journey to Ersland, the ancestral home of the Sea Wolf people. Bloumwyda is currently working to map a path to reach Ersland. Aergmhus was officially offered a place back with the Maelstrom, but he still maintains his loyalty to the Scions. After all, the Scions disbanding was only in the public eye. Considering his story today, you might be surprised by me including Arenvald in a list of other Scions. But honestly, his story didn't begin to fully pan out until Stormblood. Arenvald Lantinus is a young man from Alamigo. Unlike other refugees, however, he's half Alamegan, half Garlean. We don't have the full story, but it's implied that his mother was taken by the Garlean occupiers, and Arenvald was born not long after. Sadly, his mother hated Arenvald's blood heritage, and he was the subject of abuse as a child. In her unstable state towards him, she was convinced that Arenvald was growing a third eye, something that happens to pureblood Garleans, and thus took a knife and cut across his face. The reason you always see Arenvald with war paint on his face is to cover the scars of this assault. Arenvald roamed as an outcast to both Alamegan and Garlean alike, and fled his homeland as a result. It wouldn't be long before he discovered he had the gift of the Echo, and was thus scouted by the Scions to join their ranks. He would serve as he could and was eager to prove himself, with his time finally coming when he was assigned to be a bodyguard for Noraxia. Arenvald survived the attack on the Waking Sands with thanks to Aiba and Aulie, who gave their lives to save his. This event would change Arenvald, and he thus chose to remain in the Waking Sands to honour the memory of those that died there, even after the Scions relocated to the Rising Stones. His time would come during the events of Stormblood, when he joined the campaign to free Alamigo, not only to aid his fellow Scions, but also to prove himself a true Alamegan. Midway through this campaign, while escorting Riol and his fellow Scions back to the Rising Stones, he found himself set upon by Fordola Rem Lupus and her forces. During the battle, Arenvald had an echo experience and glimpsed into Fordola's past, but this left him unable to stop them from kidnapping Riol. After the events of Stormblood, as Alamigo began its rebuilding, Arenvald worked with Fordola on a number of missions, such as defending village and tribal leaders from a newly summoned Lakshmi using the power of the Echo. This continued into Shadowbringers, with both he and Fordola being tasked to scout one of the newly appeared towers in Pagalthan. Arenvald was gravely injured while protecting Fordola, the result being him losing the ability to walk, likely for good, but it's not confirmed. At first, he was depressed by this realization, but after the counsel of friends and those close to him, he found the courage to continue on. Fordola said it best, stating there were other ways he could help. And indeed he did. After the events of Endwalker, Arenvald helped how he could with the threat of the blasphemy in Alamigo, using both the Echo and everything he's learned over the years to become an effective leader, and someone his friends and others around him can count on. As of now, he's still active in Alamigo along with Fordola. Aulie was an Elizin Lancer of 27 years, who started out as an adventurer before being recruited into the Scions by Tataru. At first, she was dubious about the invitation, but quickly warmed to the organisation. While she could be rude at times and state things without thinking, she also had a very caring side to her. This was shown when she grew to care for Arenvald as an elder sister. She was frequently seen in the Waking Sands with Arenvald and Aiba. When Arenvald was chosen to be Noraxia's bodyguard, Aulie was worried about him, as he had never engaged a Garlean before, and given his heritage, she didn't know whether or not it would get in the way. Aulie's short time with the Scions would end with the attack on the Waking Sands, when she alongside Aiba laid down their lives to protect Arenvald. She proved her valour and devotion to her fellow Scions and her new younger brother. Alianne was a young Elizin living a normal life, until she lost her parents in a tragic accident. Struggling to cope with this loss, it was her grandfather Isildaure who cared for her. To aid her with coming to terms with her sadness and loss, Isildaure embarked on a journey with her to explore the world. Being an old man in his 60s, he's still strong and ever able to wield his axe in combat. Alianne chose to wield the arts of the thaumaturge, and they both followed the path of the adventurer. This would lead them to a fated encounter with the Warrior of Light, as we began our own journey through the dungeons of Eorzea. These dungeons and dark places would test both of their resolves, with them witnessing the loss of other would-be adventurers, like those of Edda's party for example. A misstep almost ended both of them in the darkness of the Tamtara Deepcroft. It wouldn't be until the formation of the Crystal Braves that they both found their new calling to continue on. Before the events of the Braves' rebellion, she was suspicious of the loss of her friend Wilred, who had himself been killed for getting too close to the truth of the rebellion before it began. Before Alianne could reach us to communicate her suspicions, Laurentius and the other rebels confined her to the Rising Stones with the other Scions. They would later on both free themselves once the other Scions were able to outnumber their guards. Alianne and Isildaure remained loyal to Alphinaud and the other Scions, and endeavoured to find their lost friends, and recruited many adventurers to aid in the search. Their loyalty and devotion were rewarded by both of them being invited to join the Scions officially. In their own words, when asked why they remained loyal, they explained that Alphinaud's taking of accountability for the Braves, and the Scions' dedication to protection of the world was their inspiration to remain. They would both be active behind the scenes, aiding the other Scions while the main members were away. With the Scions now disbanded, both of them are now preparing for a journey to Naxia, in order to learn about the nation's present state of affairs, and provide whatever aid is needed. For now, both are taking a needed rest in the hot springs of Kugane before they set forth. Coultenet lived most of his early years in the Twelveswood, until a chance encounter with Hoary Boulder. From that point on and for years after, both of these men were the most steadfast of friends. Earning a name for himself, he would be recruited into the Scions along with Hoary. While he is a thaumaturge, Coultenet developed an interest in ninjutsu while it was being taught in Mordona. He was with Hoary and the Warrior of Light when they found Wilred's body at Earth's Font, and he surmised that due to the cuts on the body, that Wilred was murdered. He was later tasked with escorting Philomene along with Hoary, which resulted in all three fleeing aboard a heinous ship bound for Thavnir, when the rebellion of the Crystal Braves began. As such, they spent much of their time in Heavensward at Razad Han, where he and Hoary would train in their respective arts. The trio later returned to Eorzea after the Scions' names were cleared of any wrongdoing. Coultenet had grown close to the Dolmen children of Revenant's Toll, and like them was sad to see them leave to return home. When the Scions started to fall unconscious, he searched across the realm for any learned individuals that might explain why. He, like his fellow Scions, dedicated himself to guarding the Rising Stones while they slept, and the Warrior of Light was away on the first. For the Scions were vulnerable in their current state, and with their strongest ally away, many would seek to take advantage if they learned of such. As of the disbanding of the Scions, Coultenet is travelling with Hoary Boulder with the goal of making their way to Corvos, to render what aid they can, but also to learn more about its present state of affairs. Dariustel has had an interesting path to lead him to the Scions. He started off in his youth as part of the Red Belly Wasps, a band of outlaws that operates in the Black Shroud. The acts he committed while with this group are not fully known, but nonetheless, after a chance encounter with Minfilia, he was invited to join the Scions, as she saw potential in him. Dariustel would fight the Imperials during the attack on the Waking Sands and also survive the ordeal. His survival and what he witnessed at the Waking Sands imbued him with a new sense of purpose. He would continue to devote himself to the Scions and also recruit new members to the organisation. Now regarding what happens next, I completely lost track of Dariustel after the end of 2.0. I searched all over for him, through my new playthrough and New Game Plus, but he's nowhere to be seen. And there isn't any info online about him either. If you know more about him, please leave a comment. I really want to know what this guy's up to. A young Wildwood Elizin in her 20s, Ephemie would start her adult life as a member of the Twin Adders. Like most, she was inspired by the tales of the Warrior of Light, and the Scions to which they were a member of. As a result, when the call came for the recruitment to the Crystal Braves, Ephemie signed up right away. She was equally shocked when her hero handed the Braves uniform to her personally. When the Braves rebelled, Ephemie found herself imprisoned in the Rising Stones along with many others. When the Braves were disbanded later on, Ephemie chose to stay, stating the Scions could do more and provide better protection for the realm than most. She would spend most of her time as a Scion stationed at the Rising Stones, aiding Tataru with keeping communication lines open with the Scions in the field, making her a main point of contact for most. After the Scions disbanded, Ephemie ventured on a new journey which took her to Garlemald, where she interacted with the people, sharing the songs of Eorzea as well as many tales and adventures of the Warrior of Light. In return, she has gained great insight into the tales and legends of the Garlean people. She saw this as a great exchange that would aid in bringing them all closer together. The Heldsguard brothers, Hoary and Ocher Boulder, hail from the mountains of Abalatha. When Hoary was 18, he descended these mountains to seek adventure, and prove his mettle with the gladiator arts. During his travels near Gridania, he met up with Coultenet, and the two would become fast friends and companions. Both men would make names for themselves, which led to their joining of the Scions after a few years. Ocher is the younger of the brothers by 3 years, adept in the conjurer arts. It's said he spent 1,000 days training on the shore of a fiery crater in Albalthia, before venturing out on his own to find Hoary. This journey led him to Mordona, where he would also join the Scions. However, the brothers would not reunite yet, as Hoary was missing along with other Scions. During the rebellion of the Braves, Hoary was with Coultenet escorting Philomene when they were set upon. With no options but one, they snuck aboard a heinous ship which bore them to Thavnir. When the Scions had their names cleared later on, Hoary and the others would travel back to Limsa and return to the Rising Stones. It's there that the brothers were finally reunited. However, something interesting happened. Aenor, who had a romantic interest in Hoary, developed the same for Ocher. When Hoary returned, this turned into an interest in both brothers. Hoary and Ocher would work diligently for the Scions as the years went on. While the Warrior of Light was away and the Archon slept, both took turns along with everybody else to watch over them and guard the Rising Stones. Later on, they both aided Kryl with a connection of ice crystals while researching a cure for primal tempering. Both would remain at the Rising Stones during Endwalker, with Hoary hiring Radovan and Sophie to aid him with protecting the exile from Imperials. It was during this mission that the towers themselves disappeared. Hoary was in Sharlayan with Coultenet to welcome the Scions back from ending the Song of Oblivion. After the Scions disbanded, Hoary would venture with Coultenet as they made plans to set forth to Kovos to assess the situation there. As for Ocher, he would partner with Aenor and travel to Gridania, where both were set upon training with their respective guilds and giving aid to all who needed it. Liavinne was an Elizin Duskwhite and archer. She started her adventure journey around the same time we did. She was a member of a group of 4, which included herself, Pyareo, Avery, and of course, Edda. This group would fall and stumble, and they would blame much of this on their healer Edda. It's revealed that Liavinne had affection for Avery. This would all come crashing down when Avery was killed as the party attempted to traverse a dungeon. This group would disband shortly after, with Liavinne wandering until by chance was able to join the Scions. It's most likely that she met Tataru and won her over. She spent most of her time in the Scions training and helping where she could, and was eager to prove herself. She was summoned by Minfilia to perform a duty, the first she'd been requested for, and was excited for it. Liavinne was slain by the Garlean forces that attacked the Waking Sands. Her story should have ended when she was laid to rest along with the other Scions. However, her tale would take an even darker turn than death. Edda took Avery's death hard and succumbed to madness. She took his head into Tamtara Deepcroft to perform a wedding, and sent invitations to many, including Pio and Liavinne. Pio would let us know about these goings on, and we would venture into Tamtara to put an end to them. It's there that we find Liavinne, undead and under Edda's control. She doesn't speak, instead opens up with her attacks on us, and we are forced to take her down. At the very end, when she falls, she utters her very last words. I told them she was weird, but they wouldn't listen. She would later be buried at the church of Saint Adama Lamdana, with Pio visiting her once in a while. It's a fitting resting place, which is also beside her fellow Scions that fell in the Waking Sands. Nedrick's an interesting one, as he's never actually seen in the Waking Sands or Rising Stones. We first met him in Vesper Bay, where he introduces himself as a Scion by allegiance. Nedrick aids us with information about a great many mysterious and dark places across Eorzea, giving us missions to explore and put down any wrongdoing within them. This includes ventures into the Sunken Temple of Karn, Arenvald, and Amdapor Keep. I suppose we could categorise Nedrick as an ally, as he doesn't take much action outside of what I stated beforehand. Our dear friend, the Winged One Noraxia, was sent to the Scions to join them on behalf of the Elder One, both in thanks for the Walking One's aid to the Sylphs, but also to aid the other Walking Ones however they could. Noraxia would spend much of their time in the Waking Sands, learning the ways of the Walking Ones and Thanalan. Due to Sylphs never being seen in Thanalan, these ones used their magic to disguise themselves as Hure and other Walking Ones, so as not to draw attention. As Noraxia continued their work, Minfilia assigned Arenvald to be their guardian when they ventured outside the Waking Sands. Sadly for our winged friend, they would meet their end in the attack on the Waking Sands, bravely standing in front of Minfilia to protect her from the Garleans. Noraxia held on long enough to see the Walking One once more, and pass on the message Minfilia asked them to convey. Winged One's duty fulfilled, they succumbed to their injuries and passed away. A loyal friend Noraxia was, and Walking Ones returned them personally back to the Black Shroud, to be given a proper funeral with the other Winged Ones. Their memory would ever live on in our hearts. The tale of Percevains, Slafswys and Una is one of the sadder tales to be told, mainly for how tragic their story has been to the point I had to group them together. Percevains was a masked wildwood Elizin, Slafswys a sea-wolf Rogadin, and Una was a seeker Makote. They were original members of the Path of the 12 led by Minfilia. The three companions were first encountered in 1.0, as we began our adventure around the original Waking Sands. They would accompany the adventurer to the Black Shroud, in order to aid the Sylphs recover their podlings, who had been taken by the encroaching Garlean forces. Once this mission was nearly complete, the trio took over the mission from us, and demanded a full breakdown of our progress. It was a pretty rude encounter from what I can remember, but this trio of path companions were, as Una put it later, thick as thieves. Come the calamity and all that came with it, everyone lost their memories of the trio, which included those they were close companions with. This either means they were affected by the happenings at Coultenet due to proximity, or were pulled into the rift like we were. This was never confirmed. What we do know, however, is by the time they arrived back at the original Waking Sands, the Path of the 12 was reformed with the Circle of Knowing as the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, with its HQ relocated to Vesper Bay. It's there that the trio would finally be reunited. As expected, none there could remember them, not even Minfilia. As they reminisced about times gone by and haven't been forgotten, Una pondered whether it was even worth proving who they were to be remembered once more. The trio joined the Scions and collaborated with their new allies to combat the primal threat. As time went on, they began to consider retiring from their adventuring life and that of the Scions, as they saw new and young adventurers arrive there every day. Sadly, fate would not see this come to pass. Upon the attack on the Waking Sands by the Garleans, Percevains, Slafswys and Una would each be killed defending the headquarters and their fellow Scions. Later, they would be buried at the Church of Saint Adama Lamdana, with the others who fell that day. By the time of the 14th Legion's defeat, the effects on everyone's memories had begun to fade, but it's not clear whether anyone remembered the trio after this. This makes their tale all the sadder, due to having been forgotten and never lived to be properly remembered. Radolf is a Huer Midlander and Marauder. We don't know much about his history, but he came to the Scions not long before we ourselves joined them. He has an interesting way of speaking, a poetic person with the way he speaks his sentences. Not unlike Urianger, but much less extreme. Radolf would serve most of his time between the Waking Sands and later the Rising Stones. Radolf is noted for giving very poetic statements to specific events, such as when Papalymo made his last stand. The light of the dawn is dimmed by Papalymo's passing. Those of us who remain must strive to shine all the brighter. As of Endwalker, he is keeping himself busy with the Scions disbanding and states he wishes to build upon his time spent with us and his fellow Scions. He wishes to take a more influential role in the near future, and if the Scions ever come together once more, he may just get his chance. Riol Forest is a Huer of much renown before coming to the Scions. Originally, he was a member of the Company of Heroes, the same group that fought Titan in 1.0. After the Calamity and with the company disbanded, Riol became a mercenary. During A Realm Reborn, he aided the Scions with gaining entry into the Navel, the domain of Titan. Later, when the Crystal Braves were first formed, Riol took an interest and was one of the first to officially sign up. He served the Braves and Scions loyally, and even used his old skills of information gathering to begin an intelligence gathering network in both groups. In fact, it was these skills that led Riol to be one of the first to suspect the upcoming rebellion by Ilbert and his allies. Riol raised the alarm about these misdeeds happening in the shadows shortly after the death of Wilred. Sadly, the plan was enacted, and Riol and the other loyal Braves could only look on helpless to aid the Scions. During Heavensward, after the rebellious Braves were driven off, Riol and the other Braves that remained steadfast and loyal objected to Alphanos attempting to disband the group. A compromise was instead reached, with these loyal Braves, including Riol, being invited to join the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. Riol operated behind Guardian lines during Stormblood, spreading false information and also gathering useful intel for the Scions. While the other Scions were on the first, Riol continued his information network in Garlemald, which laid much of the groundwork for the Scions to follow later on. During Endwalker, Riol continued working to gather information and guard the Rising Stones, while the other Scions were away. He also lent his aid to his former comrades of the Company of Heroes and the Warrior of Light, with putting down the blasphemy terrorizing Lanosia. When the Scions were disbanded in the public eye, Riol made it known he intends to find a way to reach Mericidia, or a path to the New World. Slafswys is a roving sea wolf and marauder. She started her career as a member of the Maelstrom, and actually fought under their standard at the Battle of Coultenet. Surviving the battle and in the years after, she was part of the Yellow Jackets, keeping peace in Limsa Lominsa. She would continue this duty until she received word of the attack on the Scions in the Waking Sands. Her sister was a Scion, and one of many who died defending it and their fellow members. Rather than succumb to sadness, Slafswys was inspired by her sister's bravery, and with a sense of further loyalty and duty to the realm, followed her late sister's lead and joined the Scions not long after. After the Crystal Braves Rebellion, Slafswys was able to lay low and remain undiscovered, until she could reunite with her fellow Scions at the Rising Stones. As time went by, she would help as she could, whether it was providing aid or maintaining the security of the Rising Stones. After the Scions disbanded, Slafswys returned to the Waking Sands to reminisce and pay respect to her sister's memory, and the memory of all the others who fell that day. Vimatia is a Mikote seeker in his 20s. He started off learning the arts of the gladiator, which led him to the adventuring life. Wyrm would be one of many who stood to defend Ishgard during the dragon attack on the Steps of Faith. After witnessing the Scions in action firsthand, he and others would join the Scions not long after the events of Heavensward. Wyrm would play a supporting role for the Scions during Stormblood, while we worked to liberate Alamigo, and was present as we stormed our way through the gates of the city itself. Other than official duties, he helped out wherever he could, often recruiting other adventurers to help him with tasks that needed done. Later on, he aided the Alamigan resistance with treatment of the Tempered, but had a constant itch to be in the field once more. He would join his fellow Scions in looking after the Rising Stones while the others slept. He later showed great concern for Arenvald after he was injured at Pagalthan, but knew better than to fuss over him due to his dislike of such. After the Scions disbanded, he kept in contact with Arenvald and followed his exploits, specifically those with the blasphemy and his other events in Alamigo, stating he would make a great leader one day. Wigstan is a Huer Midlander and gladiator. He joined the Scions around the same time as his friends Abba and Aulie. He was one of few that survived the attack on the Waking Sands, but sadly his friends did not. Nonetheless, Wigstan kept a not-so-misted outlook on events and the path ahead of them. He would come and go between the Waking Sands and Rising Stones for the next few years. When the Scions disbanded during Endwalker, Wigstan would return to others to the Waking Sands. When asked, he states, "The Scions have brought succour not only to our realm, but the world entire. I hope that Abba, Aulie and all those scattered to the four winds are proud of us." Finally, this list wouldn't be complete without recognising those other names that pop up once in a while, like Taji and Hanako at the Waking Sands, who repaired our gear and supplied us with items. Halibert is also considered a Scion member, but his true allegiance is to the Alamigan resistance. And also, the many unnamed members who fought and died defending the Waking Sands on the day of the attack. The Scions is a larger organisation than we think, with most of its membership spread out most of the time. In fact, it's very rare for them to be all seen together at the same time. The last time it actually happened is on the day the Scions were disbanded. But they are the other members of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really enjoyed learning as much as I could about our fellow Scions, and I for one hope that these individuals take a larger role in the story as it progresses. Let me know what you think about these Scions in the comments, and click like and subscribe to support this video and this channel. Thanks all, And now, as always, have a good one.